Welcome to Inside Plug, the podcast where independent creators and entrepreneurs connect and inspire. I'm your host, Devon Jones. Today on our show, we have a special guest. We have a Marine, Jacob Schrift. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So usually this podcast, we host filmmakers, cinematographers, painters, artists, and entrepreneurs. But every once in a while, we like to bring a veteran on because we're a veteran-owned platform, and we like to extend our thanks for not just, serving us, but, being present with everything that's going on. So, Jacob, we are glad to have you here on our show. And we are interested in hearing about your military journey. So, with all the branches out there, the Army, the Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, Space Force, why did you choose the Marines?
So when I first wanted to join, I was originally a kid out of Portland, Oregon. I went to prep schools, all that stuff. I just knew I didn't want to go to school. And then just looking at all the military branches, I didn't know much about any of them. I just knew the Marines had the most prestige. So honestly, it was because of the name brand. Now, I also wanted to go to a place where I had plenty of things that I wanted to work out personally. And the Marine provided a great opportunity for the longest boot camp where I could focus on myself the most. Because everything that happened at boot camp was very structured, very in line with a plan. And regardless if I knew what was going on or not, there are people who definitely did. So it was a great opportunity for me to improve myself, to figure out what I personally wanted to do with my life and where I wanted to be, and for me to work out on like many issues that I had at the time.
Awesome. So you said the Marines were the best outlet for you of all the other branches to give you the best opportunity. And have you,
Absolutely.
all right. And then you mentioned how the boot camp was structured. Speaking of boot camp, you said it's the longest boot camp of all the other branches. Am I correct?
That is correct.
All right. How was that experience being in that situation for that extended period of time?
I will say for most people can also agree that I've gone through it. The hardest day is usually day two. By that point, you've got the sleep's not catching up with you. They usually keep you awake for like 48 hours. You've gone all of these like culture shocks, and then you're also getting all your like medical things up to date. So you're just getting injection after injection. You're cold, you're tired, you're hungry. That is definitely the low point. Everything after that is generally better, but I can understand why a lot of people would thumb there or not see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so at any point in boot camp, you have people who are, quitting or having issues. I will say that the funniest feeling is where you get to like week 8 or 9, you're just looking at the other branches and thinking that they've graduated by this point. If I wanted to be a soldier, I would have already been one. If I wanted to be an airman or a guardian, it would have already happened. And I still got another month to go.
Awesome. So Jacob, in boot camp, is there anything that you learned about yourself that you didn't know?
I will say the most prolific, or just the part that's really stuck with me the longest, there was this one point, probably week 2 or 3, where I was getting into an argument with one of the other recruits, and we were just in the middle of doing something. A drone shooter walks up and just slaps my face, says, "You don't like being corrected, do you?" And that really took me aback because I was there to improve myself. And if what he was saying was true, which it absolutely was, is like, that's a fundamental flaw that I just carried with me up until that point. And it really had prevented me from achieving greatness in many other capacities. So it was really annoying to be humbled in that way. But also, that was exactly the issue. The fact that I was so adverse to having people correct me, was so adverse to listening to issues. And I still, with my, perceptions at the time, think I was in the lights in that situation that the drill instructor corrected me in. And so that's just more reinforcement to I really did not have it together back then. And that was really important that they address that. Because knowing what I know now, there's plenty of points in my life after the fact where I can recognize I was certainly the problem, or my inability to ask for help, or my inability to recognize that I was not truly in control, I did not truly know what I was doing. That has helped me more than I can ever possibly express. But even just thinking back to that memory, it's, well, I was right. I was clearly in the right. I just couldn't see what I was doing wrong.
Awesome, awesome. Let's stay on boot camp for a little bit. Because boot camp can be challenging for some people. Were there any physical obstacles that you had to overcome while you were in boot camp?
So I was a bit of a shorter guy, and it turns out I also got weird feet. So for the first like month, I did not have the right shoes. Like I need like 8.5 wide versus 8.5. So that part definitely was a difficult struggle there. Just getting shin splints and all that. But for the most part, the physical aspect was never one I truly struggled with. I won't say I was a top performer by any means, but because my body type's a little bit shorter, a little bit stockier, things that a lot of other people really struggled with, like the pull-ups or, just moving my own weight, I was already pretty competent in that aspect. There are those who are much taller than me or much stronger than me who would be able to do other aspects like the running much more competently. But then they would have their own issues where if you're a 210, corn-fed kind of guy bodybuilder, you probably don't have the cardio or the, just the general running body that you would need in order to succeed in boot camp. Or if you are a stupendous runner, and I mean like marathons in a matter of minutes kind of guy, you end up having a lot of issue when it comes to moving weights. And so no matter what body type you had going in, there's going to be something you struggle with. And for me, a lot of that was just the cardio and the moving distances, especially when it came to moving like weight from like a hiking pack. At some points, the pack was as heavy as I was. And so that was definitely struggling. However, I'm not going to say like I was any better or worse than other people because there were people in my boot camp who, quite frankly, were shorter than I am. And so I had no excuse to be failing these events. And a lot of Marines will parrot the idea that the reason why I don't quit is because the guy next to me wouldn't quit or he'd be there for me or anything like that. There's no way I would allow myself to fail when the guy right next to me has it worse. And no matter how much this could be a pity party or, just letting that old narcissism get to you. Like, yeah, you got to recognize that everyone else is their own story, their own situation. And everyone has something they're struggling at more than you are. So my job, I recognize, was to help those who are struggling in the areas I'm good at. Because inevitably there would be something I am just not competent in. And they would be the ones that are helping me at that moment.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. So now you're at the end of boot camp and you're going to your first station. How was that transition and how was the experience on your first station?
So just to put in a little bit there, after you do your 12 weeks in boot camp, then you'd have a split between the infantry and the combat arms MOSs versus the POG MOSs, the people that are runs.
All right.
So you do, in my case, I did a month of combat training, and the combat arms, they go 2 months. After that, you then go to your MOS school, your military occupational specialty. Mine was also only a few months, so I didn't have to worry about it too much. But everyone differs based on their jobs. After you complete all your training, then you go to your fleet unit. And in my case, I started out on the East Coast. Sorry, so I started on the West Coast. I wound up in the East Coast. And I was with 8th Marine Regiment, which no longer exists. I was actually there to disband it. And so it's very overwhelming going and joining a battalion and a regiment that were very infantry based as a guy who's a one of one kind of dude. Like no one else in my unit really did my MOS or did my job. So I had to figure out, as a private first class, when do I need to speak up for myself and say, hey, I need to do my job versus when do I need to listen to my lance corporals and corporals who really knew more than I did about most things in regards to everything else. So my ultimate ratio ended up coming out to doing my job probably about half a day to a day once a month. And then the rest of the time I was just trying to fill in the gaps as they came, whether that be, helping people move things on ranges or getting like certifications there, or like I'd be a guy in a tent, with the Mac. And it could be anything of like in between that, but every Marine's a janitor. So I did a lot of that too.
Nice. How was the working days for you? Could you share with us like how did your day start and how does it usually end?
So it's, again, like I said, I was an irregular case just because my MOS, but generally would show up to work between like 6:30 and 7, and then you'd work out with your unit. And like I said, I was the junior guy at the time, so it'd be whatever my corporal said. And in some cases, I was perfectly in good shape because I just came out of boot camp. In other cases, they were doing things with like weights or like, the bars, and I wouldn't be having any kind of familiarity with that kind of situation. They were really needing me through it so I didn't injure myself. So like kettlebell swings, anything at the gym, like I just don't know what I was doing at the time. So they were really, mentoring me in that aspect. But then you do things like, 6-mile runs or like maybe 3 miles, but now you're wearing your armor or whatever. Like that would be something I was more competent, comfortable with really. But after you work out, usually you're at work by like 8:30. I worked in the operations section, so I'd be doing anything from, signing people up for, courses in schools to maybe locking on ranges for, like shooting or like doing land active. It also been a lot of situations where I would be, where I'd be, trying to help that physical fitness. So I ended up becoming one of the trainers for our PFT and CFT, which are the tests you need to do semi-annual that allow you to get like promotion marks and stuff like that.
Nice, nice.
Then you usually have like an hour in chow, which was better than my like sister units. You usually get like 30 minutes, but I get an hour long. And then after that, I would go back to work, finish out whatever rockers or things I need to do for training. And then hopefully I get to go home by like 16:30.
Nice, nice. And 16:30 is 4:30 for anyone who's not accustomed to military time. All right. So Jacob, so outside of the Marines, outside of that work environment, you as a person, what would you say is something unique about you that most people, even people in your facility, are doesn't know about you? Like, what's a unique skill or hidden talent that Jacob may have?
So my mom, before she had me, started training under a Qigong master over who had come up from Beijing when they were having the issues they had over there back in the 90s. And because of that, my mom's always been really into like Chinese medicine and trying to incorporate the stuff that has scientific backing into her job as a doctor. And so what I've been doing since probably as soon as I became an adult is I've been trying to also learn Qigong to myself. Like I become certified as an instructor, but I'm nowhere near master level. And so occasionally when I'll have like people who are really struggling to like relax or calm down, I'll teach them how to meditate. But it's also really good doing, and what Qigong is fundamentally, when it compares to like Tai Chi or like Falun Gong or like these other things, Qigong is all that like mindful movements. So it's slow movement exercise is what it basically boils down to. And so a lot of what you're doing, it's not necessarily a workout in terms of like the cardio behind it, but there's a lot of trying to understand like the limits of your body through body weight movements and trying to be very mindful of what your extensions are. So where you can be aware of like, kind of like how cats have whiskers or they're the size of their body is. We need to be able to understand, truly what our, limits are of our body. And so a lot of that can come from meditation. It can come from understanding that like there is a significant delay between me thinking and snapping my fingers. And for people who are taller or longer, that is a more noticeable difference. However, us as human beings, we generally adapt to that very, very well. The only time most people will even notice that is if you're a very short kid growing up, that you have a growth spurt. At that point, you might recognize that your feet aren't necessarily where you want them to be, or your hands aren't necessarily, registering the inputs where they should be. But that's not something that doesn't exist. We just get accustomed to it. So understanding what your limitations are through that is very good, and that's what I enjoy doing. And it helps when you work out and do things like that, because I'm a very klutzy person. So when I have to do these 3-mile runs for score, or when I just go run longer because I enjoy it, it's good to understand that, hey, becoming tired means that I'm becoming more sluggish on top of the already delay that's, just institutionally part of my body, just part of the system.
I love that. I love that. All right, Jacob. So we're at that part. So being that you're in the Marines and you can be exposed to a lot of factors that's going on in the environment, how do you protect your mental health through all of everything?
So like I said, I do a little bit of meditation, Qigong, things like that. However, there's also a lot of just because of where I've been at and understanding what I've done in my past, I can use my, like, I've been an embassy guard for 3 years before, where I'm at right now. And before that, I did 4 years, in Lejeune. With all that, I can see where a lot of the institutions and media or the way we present ourselves aren't necessarily reality. And that can be very frustrating to people who are both on the Marine Corps side of not understanding why they're being accused of things, but also on the civilian side of the military told me they were doing this and they're clearly not. Why is that? And so my way of getting around all that frustration is more just looking at what's going on, why it's happening, why the narrative is becoming what it is. Because you can look at like recently we had those LA riots and there was Marines out there. And it was funny because looking at the footage at the time, and this is like within the first 3 days, there was plenty of reports of, oh, Marines do X, Y, Z. And as a Marine, I can look at that footage and be like, those are not Marine uniforms. Those are not Marine vehicles. All the serial numbers are wrong, even from the side. Like, that's not us. But at the same time, I understand the public's frustration because there was a lot of uniformed agency members from various agencies, whether it be ICE or, DEA or any of those other groups. And because they're wearing camo and because it looks like the National Guard, they're thinking, oh, well, they're not the National Guard because the National Guard says they're doing that. Well, then clearly that means they're Marines, which not true, but I understand why the Marines were frustrated because they weren't out there and they're being accused of things. I understand why the civilians are being frustrated because they were seeing certain individuals do certain actions that they thought were, not becoming of the people in uniform. Well, that's because it wasn't the people in uniform. And that's not that, being mean or, decry the actions that were being taken by the agency members. It's just they have different standard operating procedures. Their SOPs are different. The rules of engagement, the ROE is different for them. Their mission set is entirely different. When you get the National Guard into cities, the primary job is just to protect federal buildings. When you get Marines out there, same thing. It's just, the federal institutions, or maybe if the governor or the mayor's called us in, okay, then it's just, trying to maintain the peace. When you're a DEA or an ICE or an FBI member, you have a completely different mindset, a very different mission. So their whole way of interacting with the public is very different.
Thanks for sharing that. Um, so usually we're at the part of the episode where I ask the guest this question: what is a book, a TV show, or a film that you recommend? But in your case, I'll just leave the TV and film part out of it and just use this. What will be a book that you recommend someone read to kind of like, get their mind right?
So I had read this book a little while ago, a few years ago, and I had just recently finished rereading it. The book's name is Verbal Judo by George Thompson. The point of the book is just understanding what you can do and what is your fault when you get into these social situations, and how you can control your actions to try and get a better results out of things. The entire point of when the book was made was helping police officers de-escalate situations or understanding how they could possibly, escalate issues unintentionally. You don't want to be a law enforcement officer walking into a situation that's already bad, and then you're the reason why it's become worse. And we can see and point at plenty of incidents in the past, or that's a big call on TV, where law enforcement has absolutely been on the receiving end of just improper or unideal situations and circumstances. And I, as a military man, and I, as when I was in the embassy guard, my duty was to try and be the best face that America had. I was the first face that a lot of foreign entities saw as they were entering the embassy. And I did not want to be the reason why anyone hated America. And I wanted to be why, if someone didn't like America, they'd at least reconsider, or at least wouldn't be against us particularly. Now, as I've gone later in the Marine Corps, I engage with the public more often. It's the same idea. What am I doing that's giving someone a bad taste or making them think I'm inauthentic, or, trying to lie to them or anything like that? And it's not because I'm trying to. Part of me is I'm not most socially aware. And so this book has really helped me understand what I personally am doing to impact the environments I'm in, because I can't control the behavior of those around me. And to accuse them or come at them in a harsh or an aggressive manner helps no one, honestly. So it's very important that I can control myself, and I can be more graceful or more, understanding towards others, and I can extend that bridge. Because if they want to extend it back, well, then we made a connection. But if they don't want to extend it back, at least it's not my fault that we had a communication breakdown, and things can at least be kept from exploding or getting worse. So like I said, the name of the book is Verbal Judo. It's by a guy named George Thompson.
All right, everyone that's listening, check out that book, Verbal Judo. All right, Jacob. So we have a young citizen. They're ready to join the military. They're not sure which branch, and this is the biggest decision that they're possibly going to make for their life. What's some advice you give them?
So if they have an idea of what they want to do after the military, they should not be seeing the military as anything but a stepping stone. Even if you do 20 years in the service, that's not a career. That is the the preemptive measures for your career. The military should be a stepping stone, a bridge, a ladder to what your eventual goals are. Because even if you stay in for the longest possible time, I mean, like you're 40 years in as a general or something like that, you still have a career afterward. Are you going to get into politics? Are you going to get into entrepreneurship? Are you going to, go back home and become a mechanic? It doesn't really matter what your ideal goal is. The point is that the military is not the goal. The military is how you get there. Now, if you know what you want to do, well, then you can figure out what military branch best serves that. But if you don't know what you want to do, then the military can be where you try things out and you try and figure out where you want to go in life, what you enjoy, what you don't. So I recommend that everyone figures that out first. And if they can't, then join the military as a means of figuring that out. Just to say that all the branches do have different things they do and the reasons why you might want to join them. Starting off with what I would consider the default and the normal one is the Army. It's a great place for you to get an understanding of how big organizations and structures work. The military, in terms of the Army, has the most moving parts. It's the most interaction with just the lowest level. And because of that, it's a great opportunity to learn how to get like supply chain logistics, things that come with, understanding lowest level when it comes to like fabrication, or like understanding how the Military Corps of Engineers, for example, they run the Mississippi River and a lot of other river tributaries. So wanting to see how government projects work and how they, understand where the linkage between the government and civilian sector, Army is very good for that. The Navy is the best when it comes to doing trade schools and stuff like that, because most of their stuff relates directly to a trade skill. You're stuck on ship a lot of the time, so you got to be, good at many different tasks, always putting on a different hat. And that really helps people who need to get trade skills like welding or some kind of like firefighting. There's a lot of cross training that allows that opportunity to be very fruitful. The Air Force is the best if you want to go academic. A lot of the Air Force's like training and skills at schools are accredited by colleges. And so if you want to get that degree early and quick, and you have some kind of idea what your degree, what you want it to be in, Air Force is a great opportunity. They're also the most professional compared to the most militaristic of the branches, as they do operate very much like a business compared to like the Army and Marines. I will say that above them, in terms of like just really hard skills, or by that I mean like your white collar stuff, the Space Force is very technical savvy. And so whereas the Air Force might be a way to get into the tech industry, it's the Space Force that has the most opportunity to get into the extreme mastery of some of these skills, especially when it comes to like signal warfare, contested spectrums, things like that. Then get Coast Guard. Theirs is the most civilian focused. Their entire like area of operations all works around the Department of Homeland Security, because that's who they fall under. And as that, they're always really close to American shores, or always interacting with, civilian vessels. Or if they're dealing with illegal stuff, they're dealing with vessels of foreign militaries or foreign agents. So they're always very close to the American, political sector in terms of how they work with the government business. They also generally work with the least amount of funding and the worst stuff. So they're very, very good at, figuring things out. Their ingenuity is pretty high. So if you want to be a self-starter, someone who's very good at, learning the skills of what you need to do yourself in order to support a team, Coast Guard's great. And then obviously there's the Marine Corps. I love the Marine Corps. I think they're the best, but they don't offer any of the things that I just mentioned. They're there for camaraderie. They're there for an understanding of like self. Like I said, I joined the Marine Corps to improve myself. If you want to improve yourself and you don't know what you don't know, Marine Corps is great for that. We don't have the best schooling. We don't have the best trade certs. We don't have the best integration with the civilian sector. And when it comes to travel, we also have the least amount of that. There are air bases and Army bases and Navy bases in both countries. The Marines will sometimes onesie-twosie get to be on those bases, but really we're stuck in Okinawa off the coast of Japan. Maybe a small amount is in Korea. Very few are in Bahrain or in Stuttgart, Germany. And the rest of us are in California and North Carolina. So we really don't have the opportunities the other branches do, and we definitely don't have the funding or ability. However, because of our much smaller, tight-knit group, we are a lot better at being adaptable and understanding each other's jobs and figuring out where we can fit in order to make the organization as a whole work. I have been able to, as a Marine, have a lot more responsibility than any of the other branches at a much lower rank, just because I, demanded they get that ability and responsibility. And I've really been empowered by my leaders to have the same ability.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing that about all the organizations. I really appreciate that. All right, everyone, that's been our episode today of Inside Plug. Jacob, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate having you on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, you know what to do. Stay inspired and keep creating. And for all the military listeners out there, all the veterans out there, remember, thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you do for this country and all you do throughout history, like just overall. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, everyone, this has been your episode of Inside Plug. Inside Plug, signing out.